the legal challenges from immigrants' rights groups, all in hopes of avoiding an early defeat like the one in 2017 with the travel ban targeting majority Muslim nations, the one they suffered. This time, Trump may have friendlier arbiters. These fights will be refereed by a federal judiciary that he transformed during his first term, including by appointing more than 200 federal judges himself. And at the very top, the ultimate decider of these questions is the Supreme Court, to which he appointed 3 conservative justices. And he has already installed immigration hardliners in key positions willing to carry out his plans. People like Kristi Noem as the head of the Department of Homeland Security, Stephen Miller as Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, and the aforementioned Tom Hoban, the border czar. The latter two being key players in the utterly cruel family separation policy that was enacted and then canceled, reversed by Donald Trump himself during his first term. It's where we start the hour with NBC News correspondent Jacob Sobroff joining us by phone. He's the author and executive producer of Separated. Also joining us, retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, founder of Democratic Majority Action PAC, Amy McGrath is here. And with me at the table for the hour, distinguished political scholar and professor at Princeton University, Eddie Glaude is here. Jacob, let me start with you. I know this is your expertise and your body of reporting. Let me just first ask you if any of this is a surprise to you, or if this is all what has been telegraphed, both at the convention and in Project 2025.
No, Nicole, I mean, from the moment that I reported live with you from the floor of the Republican convention as, thousands of people held up those mass deportation now signs, this is what they have said they would do all along. And just like with family separation, when they said they were going to deliberately take thousands of children away from their parents to harm them in order to scare other people from coming, I learned to believe this administration. And I spent yesterday afternoon, you mentioned immigration activists and attorneys and members of civil society that fought back and stopped the family separation policy. Yesterday afternoon at a screening of Separated out in L.A., I was with dozens of them. And this is exactly what they expected to happen, what they've been planning to happen, and they certainly don't relish what they see as a fight coming ahead, but they are prepared for it. But what I will tell you is, if the military indeed is going to be involved, as is being intimated by Homan and President-elect Trump and others, some of the same concerns that we saw during the family separation policy are going to be front and center. A lot of these facilities that house children down at the border, and as well as the ICE detention facilities that house the adults, are overseen by licensed state regulatory agencies. And specifically as it relates to children, if they take those facilities and put them on federal land, it takes away the ability to oversee, child health and safety regulations and other oversight of that nature that a state licensing organization would otherwise do. And I know that is front and center amongst many other concerns about how it ultimately will affect the well-being of these children. And after they had taken them away, torture was the word that Physicians for Human Rights used. Government-sanctioned child abuse was how the American Academy of Pediatrics described it. And with, mass deportation is family separation by another name, and this time it'll be orders of magnitude greater than what we saw during the first Trump term.
I mean, let me read this reporting to you and ask you if the blowback to family separation has any tangential relation to what we're hearing about ending birthright citizenship, Jacob. This is from NBC's reporting in July. In May of last year, Trump released a campaign video renewing his call to end the longstanding constitutional right, saying he would sign an executive order on day one of his presidency that would ensure that children born to parents who do not have legal status in the United States will not be considered U.S. citizens. Litigation is a certainty. It's according to Omar Jadwat, a lawyer at the American Civil Liberties Union who was also involved in the travel ban challenge. Quote, it is directly in the teeth of the 14th Amendment. It would essentially be an attempt to tear down one of the core constitutional protections that has been a key part of our country. You take the promises to start on day one. You take the, blowback, the rare reversal, as you pointed out, to child separation. I mean, is eliminating birthright citizenship the workaround for family separation, Jacob?
It certainly seems to be one of them. And I was with Jean Guerrero yesterday, the extraordinary journalist who literally wrote the book on Stephen Miller called Hate Monger. I'd recommend everybody pick it up if you sort of want to understand the thinking of the incoming and former administration that, clearly feels newly empowered. And that has long been a project of Stephen Miller, according to the reporting of Gene Guerrero. And I do think that, family separation was, as you said, Nicolle, the rare policy reversal in the first Trump term because former President-elect Trump, was essentially forced into saying exactly what he said in the Oval Office in that signing ceremony on June 20th, 2018, as Kirstjen Nielsen stood over his shoulder when he reversed the policy after she put it into place at the direction of the White House. He said, "I didn't like the sight and the feeling of families being separated." They know how not only the American public reacted in a bipartisan fashion, but basically universally how people around the world spoke out as the Trump administration separated little children from their parents at the southern border. And I think that what they would like to do, forget about what I think, what they have said that they want to do is institute the largest mass deportation program in the history of the country. They know what family separation meant to them during the first term and how they had to react to it, how the global public reacted, how the Pope reacted. And if birthright citizenship was to be eliminated, they wouldn't have to do what Tom Homan suggested to Cecilia Vega on 60 Minutes, which would be basically suggest American citizen children leave the country with their undocumented parents. And there are as many as 20 million people in households with an undocumented family member living in this country that all are in our schools, our homes, our places of work, our churches, our communities, are our neighbors, are our friends. And obviously this is a very central focus, a large project, and a stated goal of the incoming administration.
Jacob Soboroff, thank you for joining us by phone and starting us off this hour. Amy, let me show you what the man in charge of this project, the borders are, Tom Homan, said on Fox earlier.
So I've been asked 1,000 times, how many people can you remove the first year? Well, how many agents do I have? Can we bring rehired agents back? The ones that retired, bring them back and rehire them. How many buses do I have? How much money do I have for airplanes, right? Can DOD assist? Because DOD can take off our plate. So there's a lot of what ifs. I don't know what the current budget is right now. I don't have insight on what currently ICE and CBP has for budget. How much money can be reprogrammed? I can tell you this, President Trump's committed to doing whatever he can to get us the money we need.
Because DOD can take it off our plate. What does that look like, and what does that do to the military?
Well, the fact of the matter is there aren't enough Border Patrol agents to do what Trump wants. You would have to use the military. And, a core tenet of American democracy is that we don't use our military against American civilians. And, a part of this is if you're using the U.S. military to go in and potentially take family members from U.S. citizens, it's a huge problem. What happens, Nicolle, when there's resistance? What does the U.S. military then fire upon our own citizens? Does the U.S. military fire upon civilians if there's resistance? The United States military should never be used as the Gestapo. And that is where we're headed. Many of us did some exercises on what Trump would do on the first day, and it was very, very sobering. And it will rip the military apart because it's not in our nature to turn our forces. We're not trained for it. Our guns should not be turned onto American citizens and those people living here.
I'm just going to ask you to say a little bit more about implementation, because I feel like these conversations were hypothetical for a long time. He's prevailed. To Jacob's point, he's saying what he's going to do out loud. And to the point of his own repostings, Donald Trump seems gleeful to, in all caps with 3 exclamation points, amplify, yes, this is what we're doing. In part, historically at least, year 9 of the Trump story, to soften and condition the shock of what you're describing, which is members of the United States military who don't beam in here from outer space. They are sometimes deployed far from home, but sometimes in their own communities. To turn them against American towns and cities and communities is It's a moment from which the country and the military will not be able to turn back. So say more about its impact.
Yeah. Well, we've never been in this position before in this magnitude, and it opens up a lot of can of worms here. What are the rules of engagement for such a maneuver? What would the president do? Well, he could use the Insurrection Act. He could federalize the National Guard. There's a number of things that the president could do against our own people, our people living here, and it's very concerning. One of the things that I think a lot of Americans don't know is that we have a number of non-citizens already serving in the U.S. military. About 20,000 non-citizens are serving in our United States military. My own, when I was a fighter pilot in my squadron, the ejection seat mechanic who worked on my ejection seat and it made sure that it worked was not a U.S. citizen. And we're asking these people who wear the uniform of the United States military to then turn and deport people out of our country. It's just not what many folks signed up to do. And it's really going to have an impact on recruiting. It's going to have an impact on retention. And it's ultimately, long-term, Nicolle, going to have an impact on the legitimacy of the United States military itself among the American people.
I think with the Trump story, and you and I have been having conversations about Donald Trump for 9 years now on various programs on this network. We always, as analysts and journalists, fail to imagine what he could really be doing. But listening to Jacob and listening to Amy, it is clear that he knows this by now, right? Both that moving 11 million people out of the country would be the largest movement of humans in generations. That turning the military against Americans could destroy it. He knows all those things. So what is this?
That's the question we have to ask ourselves. We've been asking, how would he execute? How would he pursue the policy? But what is he up to is the question, right? And I think part of it has to do with, America's for Americans and Americans only, right? There is this.
But what does that mean? Because this is Americans too. Is it?
Right. I think this is at the heart of great replacement. I think we need to understand. Remember what Tom Homan said. We're going to go after the bad ones first. Right. That's what he said. He didn't just say we're going to go after the bad ones. We're going to go after the bad ones first. And then what does birthright citizenship have to do with, right, illegal border crossings, right? It has everything to do with the nature of the Constitution of the demographics of the nation. And so I think we have to get at what's motivating this policy in order to understand the scope of what he might do.
But the military is the most diverse, I know it's the most diverse federal agency in the country. It's also the most diverse workforce in America.
Right, and which he will deploy to try to achieve these ends. And so they're going to be across purposes. And I think what Amy said is really important. It could literally rip the institution apart precisely because of the tensions that will be evident in the orders that will be given to do this.
Amy, you said last week that court-martialing folks like General Milley, General McChrystal, Admiral McRaven would tear apart the military. We now have from you and others this analysis of deploying the U.S. military